New record out by Linkin Park coming out in June. We are here already starting in April with doing rehearsals. We're now using SD7s, both in monitors and front of house. The great news is that we are already starting with a product through DiGiCo that is a great sounding desk already.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another Ask Us Anything. I'm very excited to be back with you. We have some amazing guests, and we're excited to get to spend some time, get to know them a little bit, ask them questions, and of course, get your questions asked. So remember, this is for you guys. So please jump on the comments section, give us your questions, funny stories, something else that we may need to know about our special guest if you happen to know them or run in with them at any point in time. So please keep the comments coming. Remember, this isn't Ask Us Anything. Now, the typical disclaimer, if it all goes wrong, we are going to try to pop back up in the same place and reestablish the feed. If it all goes wrong, just jump back to the DiGiCo Facebook page. We'll have to establish another one, but hopefully everything works today. I'm Ryan Shelton. I work with Group One Limited. We're the distributor for DiGiCo in the U.S. Joining us from Group One also, we have Kyle McMahon. He's our producer. And we got Matt Larson joining us as well, and he's going to be helping me out with questions today. And then from the UK, we have our token Englishman, Dan Page, also brand ambassador for DiGiCo, but thanks for being here with us, Dan. Matt's Kyle. Dan will be reviewing those comments and pushing those up for us as well. I'm going to give a brief little bio, but it doesn't even begin to kind of encompass the career and history of our special guest today. First off, you probably know them as Pooch and Tater. Let's see here. I was going to say that they have a very impressive roster of artists that they've individually worked with. Tater and Pooch, often referred to as professional audio's power couple, have had an 18-year relationship mixing bands like Ted Nugent, Kid Rock / Stone Temple Pilots, Prophet of Rage, Iron Maiden, and most notably 10 years with Linkin Park. Pooch, Tater, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
us. Yeah.
Awesome. So I like to start off each one and just tell us a little bit about yourself. I think we have, let's start with Tater, honestly, because monitor engineers never get to go first. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the industry and just what got you into audio.
It's a long story, but I can shorten it up pretty good. I played bass guitar in a band in high school, and back before there was PAs in the club, so you had to have a PA to play out. Basically got more involved with the PA system and dropped the bass pretty much because there was more money to be made renting it out to other bands than there was for my bass playing or bass styling abilities, as I like to say. I wasn't much of a player. I was more of a bass stylist. And that's what really led me into the industry.
Awesome. Well, that was very brief. Were you pretty good at the bass, or are you just saying you're,
Well, my bass only had 2 strings, so that'll tell you how good I was.
Okay.
But he had a cape. He wore a cape when he played a bass.
What?
In his band.
No way. Kyle, did we get any photos of that?
There's some that exist, though.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Well, what about you, Pooch? Give us a brief intro.
I've always been a musician. I started playing classical piano when I was 3 years old. My parents were both musicians, not by trade, but it was part of our family. And I ended up going to a performance arts boarding school, kind of like FAME, for high school. And that just really kind of changed my life and really made it to where I wanted to be. Really, I kind of wanted to be a musician in high school, not so much an engineer. But I won a Battle of the Bands thing that put us in a studio in Los Angeles. And this was 1984. Studios were it was reel to reel tape, and it was still a big deal. There weren't home studios back then, and I spent the entire time like watching what the engineer was doing and just going, man, I want to do what that guy's doing.
Awesome.
And so it was a real eye-opening experience for me. And then I got accepted to Berklee College of Music, and they have a music production and engineering program there, which I took. I started working at a local studio in Boston, and just emptying garbage and stuff when I was a kid. And by the time I graduated from Berklee, I was their head engineer, and moved to Los Angeles and was starting a career as a producer and a recording engineer in Los Angeles in the early 90s, and did that for 3 or 4 years and got nominated for 3 Grammys. And then I got asked by a band to mix their live sound, and I'd never done live sound before. So I found myself in front of an audience of 10,000 people mixing, never having mixed live sound before. And I instantly fell in love with the instant gratification of 10,000 people screaming for you.
Yeah.
And I just never looked back, man. I never, went back to being a studio guy. I was like, this is where it's at.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Would you say that your experience in the studio helped where you are as an engineer now in live sound? Or would you recommend a similar path for somebody else as well? Or do you think it's necessary? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that when I started, live sound and speaker technology and console technology and everything was, we were like high-fiving when you could hear the vocal. Seriously, it was like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now being a live sound guy is very similar to being a studio guy. And, the mixes that I create as a live sound guy are mixes that translate to near fields very well. So I think that path is really valid. And I think the two things, and it's all about technology. It's all about like DiGiCo, and it's about the speaker technology that it's all come full circle for me, where now I feel like what's hanging in the air is really like a pair of near fields. So I think that path, those two jobs are really merged. A lot of guys who are live sound guys are now, recording guys, and vice versa.
Cool. Well, thank you. Tater, we actually had a first question come in. Looks like Nathan Thornley was actually asking Tater. He says, I'm interested in how you use snapshots because it can be a bit more convoluted for monitors. Do you use Auxmaster safe, channel safes, or anything else? What's your methodology there? So I think they want to dive in deep right away. What you got?
So I do use snapshots. I use snapshots even for basic bands that don't really require it. I do only one snapshot normally per song, and if there's any cues in the middle of that song, I manually do them. I start out with everything saved at the beginning, and then as I need stuff, I program it in with it saved, and then I check stuff off later after I've gone through it on a bit of downtime or after the band has stopped. I'll say, I did this move and this move, go back and see it's there, uncheck it, and let it go to automation.
Okay. Very cool. So does anything stay in safe forever through the whole show? Or okay.
Yes. I normally EQs, stuff like that, any kind of compression, all that kind of always stays saved. I'd say the majority of my stuff is aux on and off, channels on and off, effects, stuff like that. Nothing too serious, but I've had a few shows I've done where I've had to get a little more in depth on stuff like that and program it in. But in general, with the bands I do, it's pretty basic stuff.
Very nice. Okay, cool. Well, I think that actually kind of leads us to another question that we kind of came through while prepping for this. You and Pooch have obviously worked together for a number of years with a number of artists. And Kyle, if you could throw both of them up there, because I think this is going to be a good time for them to answer. How do you guys handle mic pre's, particularly on the DiGiCo platform? How does that work? Do you use separate racks? Do you share? Who's in control? Tell us about that stuff.
I'll start off on this one.
I'm in charge. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Now, I'd like to talk a bit about that just for a second, because I know originally when that came out and that was able to share, everybody was like so scared of it, including me. And when you're doing a touring act, you come to find out you shouldn't be scared of that at all, and it's just something that you set and you forget it, and that's really the end of that. And it was something that worried everybody so much, and now it's like a total non-factor sharing a stage rack. So, and I'll let Pooch go on from there, but we've done it, me controlling it on Linkin Park to him controlling it now on Iron Maiden. He can give you the reasons now, but I just want to share that it just seemed like it was something taboo, and it's something it shouldn't be looked at least in my point of view at all. It's something I personally like it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I mean, I think that it's something that you should absolutely do if you're working with someone that you trust. If you're not working with someone that either you don't know or it's your first time to work with them, you can get yourself in trouble. And, the problem is, what I think the problem is like overgain and undergain, the analog side of this. If you overgain things, say I'm a front of house guy that is overgaining stuff, then the guy in monitors is going to have a real struggle, controlling feedback, controlling all that stuff, regardless of digital trim. It's how a mic pre reacts to the actual transducer. There's a connection there between the acoustic transduction and the electronic mic pre, right? And so if people, overgain or undergain, you can really screw yourself over despite of digital trim. So don't get confused. People always say, well, you have digital trim, so it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? So I'm just giving that point of view that I feel like it's important that you are really communicating with the guy on the other end of the snake about what your needs are. Because, front of house guys, let's face it, front of house guys and monitor guys tend to gain differently. And you can make decisions with your digital trim, but see what I just all talked about in regards to that. I can always turn it down with digital trim, but if it's overgained, it's still overgained.
Yeah.
So we must gain pretty close then, because when I did it and then when you've done it and vice versa, we discuss a few inputs, but not many.
No, that's true. We don't really discuss many individual stuff. And even if we do, I know that I am doing, even though I am doing the gaining for Iron Maiden, I'm actually digital trimming on my end as well. I'm gaining some of the things, thinking about what your needs on stage are actually.
Is that why you guys are known as a professional audio power couple?
I've never heard that before.
I had never heard that before, but I love it, and I'm going to start using it.
I made it up right before the start because I think it's appropriate. But that's great. That's awesome. Thank you guys for sharing that. Any other recommendations, tips, and tricks maybe for somebody that's starting off? When we get back to touring, which I'm sure will hopefully be soon, not soon enough, but soon. When we get back to that, somebody's going out and they're like, I'm going to give this sharing mic pre's thing a go. Any recommendations from both the monitor engineer and a front of house engineer's perspective on how to talk and communicate with the other engineer of what they need?
I'd say make sure that communication's open and good, and everybody's telling the truth about what's going down. But maybe a first time doing it, maybe a little bit of time to play with it a bit, see actually what's happening when they do it and when you do it and stuff like that. But I think if it's a touring band, once you get those gains locked in, and depending on if it's mics versus DIs or it gets pretty set and locked in.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's really just about communication, right? And talking to the other guy and being like, I ask guys when I'm working with guys for the very first time and I'm the one in control of gains, or vice versa even, I'll say, are you cool? Is everything all right? Tell me if there's any gains that we need to change, because I'll change them. And just being open to that, I think will solve both ends the right way.
I'll throw in this too. Also, when we're sharing one stage on Iron Maiden, we're sharing one stage rack between 3 consoles, and sometimes changeovers can get busy or something happens, and when you're in the loop, as long as one guy really has that input, you kind of know everybody's got it. So it is a kind of security blanket if you got to distract your attention to something else for a couple of those inputs.
It's part of the reason that that I am the guy that's gaining. So for instance, if in Iron Maiden, if Tater's off, something's happening on stage, he's dealing with a backline guy, whatever, I'm going to continue on with line check, and I know that I still have control over gains and can see whether or not there's an issue with a particular input, and I have the control over that. That's kind of why we decided to go that way.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Pretty particular about the guitar input levels and stuff like that. So it's good to have a bunch of eyes on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we've had a lot of good questions kind of come in while you guys are talking about gain. Apparently, gain is a question people have questions about. Real quick, for my curiosity, do either of you scope in gains into snapshots?
No.
Nope.
I've had to once in my career with DiGiCo so far. Total special circumstances, but I've done it one time, and I'd never do it again.
Fantastic.
And
I mean, I might have to do it again, but I prefer not to.
And if I was going to do that, I would only change the trim part of it. I wouldn't change the head amp.
Okay. Good to know. All right. Nick Hutchinson asked, what are the primary differences in how monitor guys gain from front of house guys? So you guys alluded to this earlier. Explain that a little bit more.
Well, I don't know. I always think when I'm gaining, I think a lot about the fader resolution, where the fader is going to lie also. So I don't think me and Pooch gain, as we said, I don't think we gain too much differently. I think I want to say when we first did this, I remember in Linkin Park, I think I did the gains and you didn't want to tell me how much you were changing it. And I think we went and re-looked, and it was a very minor difference in how we gained. So, but the fader resolution and where it plays out is big to me. I don't want to have it at the bottom or have to slam it to the top. I like to have it right in the center, and that's where I want mine to lay out. And I think Pooch does the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why our gains are the same, is because we have the same kind of thinking process. Fader resolution is important. It's a logarithmic fader. So you have the fader towards the bottom. There's any sort of small change is a huge change. Yep. If you have the fader around 0, a small change is a small change. And that's why we use fader resolution. So the thing is, though, I will tell you, I work outside of me and Tater, and I've run into a lot of monitor guys that it seems like they gain hotter than a front of house guy. And I think maybe that is to achieve the output side of it more than what front of house guys are after. I'm worried about basically a left and a right. You've got another guy that's worried about 22 stereo mixes. He may have other needs in regards to gain than I do. But I have run into other guys that gain very differently than Tater. But it just so happens that Tater and I gain similar.
Cool. Dustin Muncie actually threw in a couple of questions. And I think the core of this is, when you're dialing in your gain, is there a target range on the mic pre, the meter that you're aiming for? Is that just something you don't even think about anymore? But if you did, what would you recommend on that? Or is it all back to fader resolution, like you were saying, and less to do with metering as long as you have headroom?
No, it's really not about metering for me. It's more about, and this is the hardest thing to teach somebody. Like when I do master classes and I'm trying to help people to experience about how to gain, it's the hardest thing to teach, because there is a felt thing that happens when you use a mic pre and gain it properly, and it's connected to the acoustic transduction. And it's felt, and it's kind of like it's hard to teach someone that. I don't particularly look at meters as being what I'm using to gain things up. I listen, gain it up, and find there's a sweet spot in mic pre's. Yeah.
So say it's all about sweet spot there.
Yeah.
But on the other hand of that, once you do dial that in, don't forget we're talking about tours here, because we don't do a ton of one-offs on different consoles. But I do use the meters all the time once I've got it set, or we have it set, because everybody's always at, is the level the same? Is the level the same? Level the same? So I do rely on the metering a lot after it's set to know.
100%. Checking to make sure that
checking,
it's the same.
rechecking, yeah.
Okay.
Our world, I think why we're successful in working together as a team is we have the same philosophies about everything being the same all the time. If anything is out of whack, if anything looks even a little bit different, then there is something going on. And so both of us are super anal about that, super OCD.
Awesome. And unsurprising, but awesome. Cool. So question about mic pre's. You guys have been using DiGiCo for a little while, quite a few years now, and you had 24-bit pre's, I know, and had experience on those. Have you used the 32-bit pre's, and what was that transition like for you guys using those?
Why don't you talk about the inputs, and I'll talk about the outputs.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. So it's funny because we got one 32-bit input card came to us right when they first came out. And Tater and I did the old, let's plug a 58 into it and check, listen to the input of a 58 exactly gained the same as the 24-bit cards. And literally both of us looked at each other like, what is happening? Wow, this is amazing, 32-bit wise. What's interesting about it is later on, for me anyway, I know there's a latency difference between those two cards, so you have to be careful about plugging the same instrument into two different cards. But there are some instruments that I like on the 24-bit cards.
Oh, interesting.
Things that are a bit cleaner and need to be more transparent don't need the harmonic distortion that happens in the 32-bit card. I plug into a 24-bit card, keyboards and that kind of shit. Okay. But be super careful. The latencies are different. Don't take a bass guitar, a bass DI, plug it into a 32-bit, and a bass mic, plug it into 24-bit. You're going to end up with a bunch of comb filtering. So,
fair enough. Very cool. What about you, Tater? What about the 32-bit output cards?
Me was the notice of the noise floor difference. Really, they were so on the in-ears. They were so much quieter, and it was one of those things where you first plugged into it, ran the noise, shut the noise off, and you did a frequency check walking around. It was, is the pack on? You're turning it up, and it was so quiet. The noise floor came down so much. It was really made a big difference.
Awesome. Very cool. A couple of random questions here. I am probably going to butcher this name, and my apologies here, but Odysseus Tatis Sophianopoulos.
Yes.
I know I butchered that, and my apologies.
Shout out to Greece. Shout out to Greece.
Yes, that's right. Do you use the cameras on the SD7s?
Yes! But not the way you would think.
Explain that. What do you do?
Me and Pooch have used it between us before, but on Iron Maiden, I can't see the drummer. He's in the set back in a box, kind of. Three walls, just the front's open, and I cannot see him at all. So I was lucky enough for Don, the video director, gave me a feed of his cameras, and I got a feed of the hi-hat camera facing the drummer. And I can see the whole drum kit now just on my SD7 screen, and I love it. And I couldn't probably hit all the cues he needs if I didn't have it.
And with that, you can see little stuff that he's like either saying to Charlie, the drum tech, or he even knows that you're looking at him, right? Like he'll turn to the camera and be like, this down,
Yeah, and you can just see if other stuff's going on. Like, why does the snare sound weird? Then you see Charlie jump up there and change the snare drum out. So it's like we're talking to each other, going, why does it sound weird? And then I see Charlie's changing it, which maybe Pooch can't see. I don't know. So, but he is in it's a drum riser, but it's 3-wall. It's got two sides and a back, and only the front can see. So that camera is, and I thank the video guys, Don, for doing that for me, and it was a major help in my success coming into Iron Maiden.
Yeah. I use it. I always, whatever gig I do, I ask the video director for a feed of whoever follows the principal, whoever that is. So with Justin Bieber, it's Justin Bieber. With Iron Maiden, it's Bruce. And the reason is that I don't mix on risers. I mix on the ground and I mix sitting. So guys standing in front of me, like right in front of the barricade, a lot of the times I can't see the stage well, but I'm an audio guy. I don't care about seeing the stage well. I want to hear what it sounds like. And so I have that camera there just to see when he, takes his mic and sets it down or is walking off stage or, all those kind of things. I can use it for that. So. And
you also use it for a spy cam in rehearsals when you're not in the same room.
Yes.
Spy cam is a general term. He's not spying. He's just seeing in the room he can't see in.
There you go. Very cool. Awesome. Let's see here. What else? Tater, one for you from Kyle Gerhardt.
I know that guy.
Yeah. Do you turn the pilot tone off on the PSM 1000s when you're doing a stage walk?
I do not. I leave the pilot tone on, but don't forget I have a preset EQ at wherever the pilot tone is, 16, 18K. I have in my preferences, I pop it on in an EQ, taking it out as far as it'll go down on the EQ.
Okay. Very cool. Pooch, somebody from Facebook was asking, I want to ask how he got flowers from Elvis.
Oh, that's me.
That's you? Is that you?
That's
great.
Probably for me. That's Frank Scambolone.
Nice.
Is that from Frank?
I don't know. I didn't see who it was from on there.
Yeah,
it's gotta be. It's got to be Frank.
Elvis is he's referring to as not Elvis Presley, but Sully Erna from Godsmack. I had a particularly bad night one night on that tour, and didn't go good. And I forget how it went down. It's quite a few years ago. And the next day, Sully gave me flowers, so to make up for his, typical bad show maneuvers. So that's how it happened.
Well, let's take a minute here. You're saying that you had a bad show?
My show was great. He had a bad show.
Okay.
We never have bad shows. They only do.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. I was like, wow, I didn't think that was possible. But
I've had plenty of bad shows in my life. Plenty of them.
We all have, and if you haven't, you're just lying. Pooch, Kyle Gerhardt asked, why mix on the floor versus the riser? Because of the coupling difference in the low end, or I think you alluded to as well, you wanted to be similar to the plane as people that are hearing it. But what's...
Yeah, but mainly it is about a riser that couples with low end. I'm really super OCD about that crossover point where subs and the lows part of a PA meet. And I'm really sensitive to that area. I believe that if you get that part of your mix right, the rest of it will kind of fall into place. It's the hardest part of being a mixer, I think, is that 100 to 250 range or 80 to 250 range. And so by being on a riser, I think it gives you a really bad scope on what's happening there. So yeah, that's why I go on the floor.
Yeah. Very cool. Okay, kind of follow up to the low end thing. Blair Bondi asked, how do you both deal with the differences in dynamic kick drum frequency response for a drummer who is not very consistent, i.e. burying the beater kills a whole lot of low end and has a ton of attack, and regular hits are overall very balanced. Any recommendations there, gentlemen?
It's called a plugin called F6. And now in DiGiCo land, it's Spice Rack with their dynamic EQ compression. Yeah, for me, it's about having a tool that does expansion and compression, right? And being able to, when someone is really attacking a beater, to have some expansion in the low end to kind of compensate for that. And then when they're not hitting it so far, it's maybe, doing some compression. So, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of great tools out there now. It's funny. I think about this all the time. Like I have no idea what I did 20 years ago to make all this work. Now I have all these incredible tools. So anyway, I don't know. Tater, what do you do?
Well, for me, it's a lot different because I'm trying to make him keep his foot into it. You know what I mean? So if I'm leveling it out, he lightens up and he thinks it's fine still. So I try to do maybe a little bit more of the opposite and not put too much stuff on it and let him be the drummer knowing when he's getting light or getting heavy by hearing it and not trying to change it. Try to keep himself consistent. This
brings up a great topic, which is you and I communicate a lot about vocal in this regard, because a monitor engineer with ears can make a dude literally pull his microphone away from his head. And that screws everybody over, right? Like me and the monitor engineer. And so Tater and I talk a lot about, hey, dude, I saw later on in the show, he was starting to pull away. Were you having to turn up? And so the monitor guy's job, a lot like what he was just talking about with the kick drum, is, man, keep that dude right in that microphone, man. Keep him in it.
Keep him in the game. Got to keep the guy in the game, man.
Sorry, him or her. It could be a her.
Him or her. Yeah,
that's true.
Keep the performer in the game.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's actually brought up a minute ago, but let's see here. Alexi Belle. I'm going to go with that. I'm sure I'm butchering that one again as well. Sorry, Tater, do you use Clang for IEMs?
We have a Clang question. I was going to say, someone give me a Clang question. Of course I use Clang. I like to say I was one of the early adopters of it, and I think I was, but it was out. It was presented to me in the middle of a tour, and it wasn't something I could throw in the middle of a tour. At least I didn't think I could then. Now I know I could, but then I didn't think I could. And the tour ended, and I was just dying to use it. And between a guy who mixes Ghost, Squid, and Pazihara, and Pazihara, helped me get it going. And also so did Sia. We all know Sia. And we did it at Linkin Park rehearsals, and we did it with the back line guys first. The band was weeks from coming in, and we were pretty much ready to go, and had the back line guys really use it. And I got to tell you, I've used it for since then, it's been a while now, and I probably will always have it as a tool in my arsenal, let's say, here on out, no matter what. Because like Iron Maiden, I didn't really think I was going to have a chance to implement it. And boy, did I find out it worked great on Iron Maiden. So as I didn't think I was going to be able to use it on Iron Maiden, it solved a huge problem for me. And another thing I don't use it on Iron Maiden this way, but another thing like to give it a big shout out is it is one of the best personal mixers out there. Forget the 3D stuff, personal mixing side, thing's fantastic.
Awesome. Didn't you solve kind of like update the setup for the drummer? I'm trying to remember his name for Linkin Park, because didn't he use a personal mixer? And you would can you walk us through that? Because I'm sure I'll get some of the details wrong, but just how he was using the previous system, and then how things changed when you moved to Clang for that.
Well, the best thing when we moved to Clang was we found out, and this was just a byproduct of using it. We didn't realize that the click was always obviously, the loudest thing there was in the mix and the drummer's mix. And those guys are all they want the newest technology, but they're also very conscious of their ears and protecting their ears. And what I was doing before this was I looked at it like a guy at a machine shop in front of a power hammer every day. The same frequencies pounding, 4-hour shift, but the guy at the machine shop is getting the same frequency. So I came up with this plan. Don't know if it worked or not, but I came up with this plan of just every day changing the frequency, the boost frequency of the click every day, just not by much, just by a little bit, to hopefully help ear fatigue with the click. But then when Clang came along, just naturally, the click levels, I don't want to say half, but pretty close, came down in half. Wow. And that solved a lot of issues right there. There was a defined space for the click where he wanted it. His mind knew where to go to key on it when he really needed to key on it, and come off of it when he really didn't need to be on it, and without it constantly pounding him. And the click levels came down, and I think that was a byproduct that at least I didn't realize at the time, and was one of its major benefactors when I started to first use it.
That's the difference. That's the difference between having click straight down the middle and you able to take the click and put it somewhere, around his head or whatever, right? Yeah.
Hey, awesome. Tater. Yeah. Can I ask a question? Sure. Talk a little bit about what had happened. What was the result? How did the artists feel when you actually introduced the Clang system? And also, can you also explain what you actually did with the Iron Maiden?
Yeah. Well, the artist reaction was fantastic, but I got to say, we had it pretty dialed in then. They came in, and I was able to kind of carve these tunnels for the vocalist, like that. The vocal was right down the center, and the band split to the sides. But the backline guys, I remember the first time we went in there, and I had it on, and I was just new using it. I've noticed those guys started backing up to try to hear the amplifiers. Right. So I'd have them behind them, and if they wanted it louder, they would naturally start walking backwards to hear it better. But it was, it was tracing back with them, so I had to figure those balances out and get them right, because they kept trying to walk into the sound to hear themselves, and they couldn't do that anymore. So that was one of the first things. And with Iron Maiden, this is where I got the idea for Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden, legacy metal, older school band. The way they want to hear their in-ears is like hearing the back line, but in a more controlled environment. Well, they want the amplifiers behind them, not left and right in their head. So all I did was take all their guitars, move them into like a backline situation with the Clang, and that solved a lot of issues. It felt like the amps were positioned where they were positioned on the stage for them, and everything else was positioned the right way, instead of just having two left and right ears in it. Just gave that just enough definition, and the spacing was right, and it turned out great for that.
Awesome. Very cool. I am going to take a wild guess because of the stuff, Pooch, you were just talking about with using a plugin like F6 to expand the low end on a drummer who's getting more into the beater. And what you were just talking about, Tater, with being able to carve these and craft these immersive mixes for your artists. I'm going to guess you guys use Virtual Soundcheck.
Yes, we do. Okay. Pretty intensely.
Well, will you explain? Go ahead,
you also
Tater,
have to remember, most of those bands we work for don't sound check. So It's imperative. So I'll let you go ahead from there. But I just want to say we're not doing sound checks, so it's imperative for us.
Awesome. Well, my question is, how do you use it? Do you guys have systems that are synced together, or are you splitting that together? Are you doing a virtual sound check together? Is it something that's isolated? How often are you using it? Are you recording every show? What's your process for that?
I mean, literally, I don't think I could function without virtual sound check anymore. I don't remember how I used to do it. I really don't. Just the ability to be able to, loop a section and work on it over and over again. Maybe it's a tom fill section or, whatever it is indispensable. But we do something really cool in Iron Maiden where I run virtual playback from front of house. But we are piping it to all three consoles. And so we're getting it to Monitor World and we're getting it at front of house. And so that we get kind of a more accurate representation of what's happening. While I'm doing virtual sound check, hearing it through the house, Tater's able to hear it in all of his mixes, plus the wedges. And Gonzo's can hear it coming out of some wedges for Steve and side fills for him. And it gives kind of a, the problem with virtual sound check is that the backline isn't happening when that happens, right? So a lot of people are like, well, it's not the same. This gets it to be just a little bit closer to really what reality is. Yeah, sure. And the way we're doing that is, I'll let Tater tell you how we do that. How do we do that, Tater? Do you know how we get it?
Well, we got an orange box and Maddie DMI, right?
Yep, that's right. So it ends up coming out of my desk as a Maddie stream into an orange box, and then ends up in the Opticore stream for Tater to pick up on his end.
And then I go out Maddie.
You go out Maddie to the third console.
Yeah.
So that's how we're getting it there.
Nice.
Had to think about that. We did it so long ago. Now it's just plugging in. Now it's matching orange to orange, red to red. Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
That's right. I knew it was orange box and it was in the loop, and we did in a Maddie DMI.
Yeah.
Awesome. How many channels are you typically tracking and playing back?
Well, we're only one stage rack with Iron Maiden, so it's 56.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Can you talk a little bit about your audience microphones that you're using, that you're recording? And then also, when you're working with a Tater, how often are you using your near field speakers versus the full PA?
Well, okay, I'll answer the last part first. I always say, I mean, sometimes there is a need to turn the PA off, but the PA is never off when the band is on stage. So I like to work with the PA on most of the time because that's more accurate representation for me of what's going on.
Yeah. So I mix on near fields for probably an hour to 2 hours every single day. I listen to the previous show. I am constantly working on my mix. There's never a time where I say it's done. And so if there was something that I heard the night before that was weird, I spend every single day an hour to 2 hours on near fields. And then I'll put it up in the big PA. So
very nice. Cool. So kind of back to the Opticore loop thing. We obviously have a feature that's called con-send and con-receive. Do you guys implement this at all? And what, if so, how?
We do.
Yes, we do.
Go ahead.
Question answered. Moving on. No.
Love con-send and receive. Doesn't eat up any extra inputs for stuff like talkbacks and all that stuff. So we do the talkbacks through con-send and receive. We do front of house playback through con-send and receive.
Yeah. So I do. Just so you know, that what he's talking about is not like a mix. I do the intros. I trigger intros in between songs, and they're coming from, man, it's a whole thing. It comes from a machine into a Mac Mini that is coming down the sound grid stream into my console, and then being fed Opticore to or con-send and receive to Tater. So and also and Gonzo. That's why we used con-send and receive for that, is so that both consoles could pick that up. And so whenever I do an intro, trigger an intro, it gets sent on that. So yeah, talkbacks and that. And do we use it for anything else? I think that's it.
Seems like we do, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
with two monitor desks and a front of house desk, it's easy just to pick it up off the Opticore. It's so simple.
That's what makes it so great. Send and receive is to be able to, you can send and receive a bunch of stuff between 3 different desks.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I was just laughing because I saw a comment come in from Chris Raybold. But the question is actually, it's actually for you, Tater. How do you stand being around Pooch so much? And do you find it affects your mix? God bless you.
Well, he's 100 feet away. It's not that close.
It's not like we hang out when we don't work with each other. No, that's not true. We're best friends.
That's awesome.
But yeah, no, we are, I got to tell you, we are an old married couple. Sometimes we bicker and sometimes we, we need therapy in our marriage sometimes, but for the most part,
we're that picture. Wow. There's an oldie, but good. I see that Kyle threw that.
Oh my God. Look at that.
100 years ago there.
I don't even know what year that was. Do you know what year that was? I have no idea. 90.
I know it was in Vegas.
Yeah.
So good. All right, we'll back to actually answering questions from people now. Thank you, Chris, for making us laugh there. Blair Bondi asks, Tater, audience mics. Do you have any setup at front of house folded back to you? Are they time aligned? What's a normal audience mic plot for yourself?
Okay, well, that all depends on the artist you're working for. Okay. So, Iron Maiden, only my guitar players are on ears. And they want very minimal audience or ambient kind of mics in their ears. So, all I have is one left and one right. And I think, Pooch, you have one separate input left and right on the stage also of an audience mic. I take a separate microphone than Pooch does in that instance. Linkin Park, I had the best success with audience mics I've ever had. I had 2 from Pooch. I actually had 4 from you, but I only used 2.
From front of house, yeah.
From front of house, all right. And then I had a stereo microphone on the stage, and I think we set it back a certain distance that we had determined, something we stole from Joel Singer or something like that. And it worked quite well.
Yeah.
So it may have needed a bit of time of alignment. I don't quite recall, but that's all I use.
It's funny because I forgot that you asked this earlier. But I find, so many guys spend so much time time aligning audience mics, right? Like they all want them all to be, time aligned with the PA. And I really find that in the mix later on, I don't usually time any of that stuff. It sounds really good when it's all weird and latent and spacey and whatever. Whenever you're using audience in that, I prefer it to have that kind of stuff in it. The way that I place audience mics for the most part is usually a condenser and a shotgun on either side of the stage. And then out at front of house is 2 condensers and 2 shotguns. So it's a total of 8 inputs for me.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I'm constantly on that DCA, constantly riding that. And sometimes, I should also say this too, not really on Iron Maiden, but other bands, depending on how PA's coming back and the room's coming back, I will leave that on just a touch. I kind of have a feel for where I want how much in there. Not obviously in between songs. I'm boosting it way up. But I kind of have a feel for it where I put it in throughout the whole song. I sometimes leave it in a little bit, sometimes a little more, and sometimes I don't have it in at all.
Cool. I think this question from Daniel Silva actually ties into that really well, if you wouldn't mind to keep explaining this, Tater. Tater, do you use control groups much beyond effects, if at all, while mixing monitors? If yes, how so? Can you explain how you use control groups, DCAs, your setup?
I usually... I know a lot of guys will do like an artist in a band. I'm usually doing 4 rock stars, 6 rock stars. So I've got to concentrate and keep my attention on everybody. So I'm not using, I use them a touch for overall for some, like if there's some playback, stuff like that, some guitar pieces, stuff like that, audience mics, but I'm not using them in a way someone would do pre-fade and use them to mix an artist, because I usually do bands with all rock stars that all need attention.
Awesome. That's really good to know. Jose asks, what's the smallest venue you've mixed with Maiden, and how different was it for you both from the biggest?
Gods. I'm trying to think the smallest one that I've done with them.
None of them are small with them.
Yeah, they are. I mean, they are, man. Yeah. We played one gig, the year before you joined us, Tater, when Mike Millet was mixing monitors. We played a gig, way up north, in the UK, and I can't remember what city it is, but a little tiny place with a stage that's just, pushed against the back wall. Dan, I don't know if you know where I'm talking about, but
some little place, I don't know, Manchester.
No. I mean, like way north, like in,
don't know, Scotland.
Anyway, Scotland, yeah, somewhere in Scotland. Anyway, it was, I would say, probably 5,000 seat thing, and that's the smallest. And it, for me, I mean, at least in front of house, and I would bet in monitors, it doesn't matter the size. Obviously the acoustic space, you have to take that
Changes
into account. Yeah. But we do adjustments with speakers to try to counteract that. So really, it doesn't matter to me. What comes out of my console every single day is pretty much the same thing. I make adjustments in speaker adjustments, but what's coming out of my left and right every day is pretty much the same.
Nice. Let's see. I had a question. I'm going to try to find it here so I can give credit to the right person who asked it. They were actually asking about, this would be from artist to artist, and you change consoles. Here we are. It's Junior Williams. Question: do all your mixes and workflows still remain the same if you're on an SD12 versus an SD7? So obviously on certain artists you've mixed, you've done smaller consoles. You haven't only exclusively rolled with something like an SD7. How does your workflow change as you move from console to console, or does it?
Maybe I'll tackle that one, because I went from SD7 on one tour basically to an SD11 for about a year. So that was a pretty big jump.
It might be the biggest you could possibly make.
Yeah. I tell you what workflow changed the most was I could take the lid off of the SD11 by myself. And I can't do that on the SD7. So that was my biggest workflow change. And the console never left the table rack it sat on the whole tour. So it never came off. But I think I try to do everything the same. I try to use the same things, how I start from structuring the desk all the way to how I set the whole desk up. I think I do it the same no matter what size the desk is.
Mine
try to do it the same.
Yeah. So I try to do the same, but mine does change. Usually because of the limitations of groups and such. With Quantum, you have unlimited amount of groups going on there. So I literally make stems of stems of stems, breaking stuff out so that I can give broadcast guys whatever they want. You know what I mean? So if I'm on an SD7, my workflow is a crazy amount of groups. As I get into, I did a tour with an SD12. I tried to work in that kind of mindset, and I actually ran out of groups. If you can do that on an SD12, I know it's difficult, but that's really the only thing that changes. My main mindset, it's the limitations of whatever the gear is, and however many inputs and however many outputs.
Okay. Cool. Let's see here. Blair Blondie is asking both of you, what's on your DiGiCo feature wish list? Anything you wish to see in the near future? I mean, we have Dan Page with us. And for those of you who don't know, you just ask Dan whatever you want, and then it shows up in the software. So since you have him here, why don't you just, is there anything out there that comes to mind that you'd like to see?
For me, the biggest thing was the Clang slot cards, and it came out. So that was a big one for me.
For me, it's just expansion of where they're going with mustard and spice rack. You know, I as soon as I fired up all that stuff, I started going, oh man, this is a whole other world. It's great stuff. You know, so the ability to put some of that even more than what you're giving. More. We want more.
One more.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought, you know, dreamed of nodal processing before because of all the duplicate channels, and now you've made it a reality. So you guys are way ahead of my thinking. So just keep going the way you're going, and I'll be all set.
I think
Spice Rack is definitely one of those development platforms that, you know, we've committed with Chili 6, the direction we're going to go, and I think there will be more coming. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. I'll say this, and it's not just DiGiCo, it's every kind of manufacturer that makes this stuff that I use. Make a good reverb. That's what we want. That's like, you know, the hardest thing I know is a DSP hog, and everybody has struggles with making a great sounding reverb, but I think everybody is in search of the best sounding reverb. So if you guys make a couple of those, we're in.
Okay, noted. I'll have a word with Mr. Gordon.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that Percacity pays us not to do that, just so they have to keep selling units.
Yes.
I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but cool.
And I'd also like to say, kind of along those lines, is the customer service that has to be there, and which DiGiCo always provides, and that's a big thing to guys on the road when you're, you know, wherever you are, because it can be anywhere. As you know that somebody's got your back. That's a big deal to me, and goes a long way.
That matters way more than the gear does, man. It's the relationships that you guys, the support that we get. You know, I mean, I had a console. I had an SD7 that had one of the engines had a problem with it, and Dave Big flew to Tel Aviv. You know what I mean? That's the kind of support. That you know, you can't get anywhere else, and that's why we're DiGiCo for life, man.
Awesome. Well, glad to hear that. So on that
James
note,
will make sure of that.
Yeah, this is also very true. That's awesome. I do have a note here that I'm supposed to ask Tater about latency and word clock. I don't know why that's in there, but these are some of your favorite topics.
I forgot to bring that up. You asked me why I got into audio. It's because of my love of latency and word clock. They're such sexy topics that I love to deal with. You know, when you start to mix a band, worrying about latency and word clock, really why I got into audio.
That's why I got into audio.
Absolutely. So good. Pooch, this one's for you. Alexandru Pana. Pooch, at what level do you like to hit your mix master bus? I know you ride the output matrix using a control group, -10, -20 dB. I think he's just kind of looking for your gain structure on the output side and how that process works.
I don't think that I've ever really thought about it. I definitely, you know, I am not I'm not the guy that's like looks at meters. I'm the guy that like, you know, how does it sound? But I am not the guy that is mixing the mix bus like people mix Pro Tools and records, you know, right up to 0. And just using an L2 to keep it from hitting the clip. I'm not that guy. I tend to, I'm a little bit old school, so I kind of mix around where VU meters used to be, you know what I mean? So you're mixing right into 0 and having that, you know, +3 range in a VU meter. So, yeah, I mean, you know, I can't really tell you what the numbers are, what I'm shooting for. It's, I look for something that sounds good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. All right, this actually gets back to a couple of Waves-related questions that we had pop up and some that we had as well. The first one I want to talk about, you've obviously, you use Waves. I know they make a lot of great products. I would completely agree with that as well. Love those guys. You've been around using Waves with DiGiCo for a long time. In fact, that video we watched at the intro showed Waves being on the DiGiCo consoles. That is, of course, not the case now. How do you guys feel about that? Has there been any real change to your workflow? Thumbs up, thumbs down? What do you think? Has it made any changes in your world?
Definitely for me, because everything everything loads faster. So I like that, comes up quick, and it seems a lot more stable off. So it's more of just firing up in the right firing order that I try to do the same every day. Comes up much faster, and I definitely like that. And I'm loading the first session for sure.
Cool.
I was actually the guy that introduced Waves along with DiGiCo. I was at that European, unveiling of Waves on DiGiCo. I was like the guy that did that. So yeah, I've been here ever since it came. Listen, I prefer it how it is now, and the reason is a bunch of different reasons, but mainly it's the speed and the stability part of it. You're no longer taxing any of the CPU in the desk itself to try to run a control part of that. And then honestly, as being kind of an older school sound guy, it makes more sense for effects to be kind of off the side, like not part of what's going on in front of me. That's the second reason.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
The feel.
And the third reason for me is I can do way more with the center screen now. Like for instance, on an SD7, I put a lot more metering there now. My snapshots are there now. Whereas before I was like putting all that crap off onto an overview screen. Now there's a lot more stuff available for me to see in an instant, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I've got.
Yeah. I'll elaborate on that because the plugins I use, especially the main plugins I use on the outputs, and I'm not adjusting those in the show. It's all set, and I don't need that screen dead center. I got much more use for that screen instead of having that on there because I don't need it every time I hit the button for sure.
Yeah.
Very good. We had a question from Shannon Fernandez. Pooch, how do you deal with delay compensation? So this is staying within the Waves realm here. How do you deal with that on the console?
It's just so funny because it's like, it's always a discussion. People are always talking about latency and delay compensation. But I feel like since the quarantine, people like Scoville and a bunch of people are like, this is like the topic is, time
to dig in. Time to dig in and figure it out.
I am latency is important. And it's something that definitely in digital audio, you need to have a grip about what's happening, and make sure that you aren't doing stupid bussing in order to get yourself in trouble. But I do use latency groups in Waves to compensate for some things. I use the same plugins on different buses. So for instance, like parallel drum bus, I'll put the same plugins on the same buses, even though one of those buses, I'm not using anything in the plugins. Like literally the thresholds are all the way down and the gain is set to 0. And those plugins are doing nothing. They're basically just place markers for latency. So I do that a lot. If I'm really, it's about using your ears. If you hear something that's weird and you start hearing comb filtering and you start hearing weird stuff, then I start like trying to figure out what's going on. But it is, I'll tell you, maybe unlike someone like Scoville, who he seems like he has it on the forefront of his brain the entire time while he's working. I don't, to be honest. I'm way more like, okay, I'm mixing along, things are sounding good, not really caring if it's 4 samples out of whack. If it sounds good, then it sounds good, right? So I tend to function like that. And that, I'm not saying anything bad about Scoville, man. He's amazing about what he does. And he, and in a lot of ways, he works on a different level than I do in regards to all that shit. But I'm just saying for your average guy out there, if it sounds good, it sounds good. The guy with the 40-ounce beer is not standing there going, that's 4 samples out, man. That sound is 4 samples out. I know it is. I can hear the comb filtering. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying, that, pay attention to what it sounds like. And if you have something that sounds weird, then you investigate. And then I'll get nerdy about it. I'll fire up Smart and I'll look at the bus, latency between two things and if I have to. But it's not something that's my go-to.
Okay. Love it. Let's see here. I think this is back to what Tater mentioned just a minute ago. Troy was asking, what's the right firing order for working with waves offboard? Is this just kind of your specific methodology that you use, Tater, kind of day by day? Or is it something specific to the Quantum 7 and dual engines, dual servers, that kind of stuff?
I don't think there's any specific in the manual list order. I do it to stay consistent every day of how I turn on and how I check stuff to be sure I, in my mind, know I've done it right. Like if I have a rack of in-ears that's a rack of 10 in-ears and mic receivers and all that stuff, I know how many on buttons I turn on every day in that rack, because if it doesn't match the number, I've missed something. Okay. How many times have you missed the antenna combiner? You know what I mean? And something's happened. So I have a set order that I do. It could be wrong, could be right, if there even is one, but it's just for me to keep myself in check, to make my day be consistent every day. That's all it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Very cool.
Once you have a way that you fire up and, let's face it, everything in the world, Tater was making fun just a few minutes ago about, word clock, but I'm telling you, everything that is connected, I have a bunch of digital audio all being connected into my SD7. They all have to see word clock and they all have to play nice with each other. And so firing up the same way every day helps to prevent any of those kind of issues from happening.
And also, we have a lot of stuff, stage racks, consoles that are on dual power supplies that we have half on UPS, half not. So if you forget to turn that UPS on and you have the stage rack is going to work on one UPS, you need to have an order to do that, to be sure that is on there. UPSs are on first, so you get both sides. Because you get in a rush, if you don't do the same thing every day, you get in a rush, you're going to forget something.
Hey guys, I got one for that as well. You were talking about sharing racks earlier. Do you have the same thing with session loading, shared racks, fiber loop, set order that you're bringing the loop up in?
Well, I think we don't, but we do, because I think
it's dictated by the order of how the day goes. Yeah.
Yeah, because it depends when the snake comes up to stage.
Yeah.
So I think there is an order because of that.
Yeah, I tend to be the first guy to fire up, right? I think, and I'm working.
Yes.
And I'm working in virtual playback while you're not even haven't fired up yet.
Yeah, because I could be doing frequencies or something, but I think somehow in some strange way, it does pretty close happen in the same way every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we're creatures of habit is really what it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I almost missed our friend RJ. Where is his comments? Okay, so RJ Givens, he was asking, I think this is for Pooch here, aux sub or full range? That is the question, right? So for the next hour, go ahead and explain to us, Pooch.
Oh man, I never understood the sub aux thing. I come a couple of things. I come from a place that is, two sources. It was never three sources when I was a kid, consumer audio wise, right? It was left and right. There was never left, right, and sub. So I'm always the low end and sub information always came from only two sources. So when you start talking about putting it on an aux send and having volume control independent of what's happening, it doesn't click in my brain how to work that way. That's first. Second, having the ability to adjust the sub using an aux send it definitely shifts phase and where your crossover point of where the sub meets the low end in relation to the volume that you use, right? So If you don't have it on an aux send, that's very simple. It remains the same, right? You know, the adjustment of that is in your mix, and you're using high pass filtering to keep things out of the sub, but it's all kind of coming from one source. When you have two sources, you're now actually shifting crossover points in a speaker system and moving phase-wise the time alignment of subs versus your left and right. So it's just not a good idea, in my opinion. Also, I tend to actually let a lot of my inputs tickle the top part of a sub. And the way that I do that is by using a high pass filter. You can get down in there to where a snare drum might have the bottom part of the snare drum might actually have a little bit of sub information in it, you know? The bottom part of a heavy metal guitar might actually have a little information that's getting to the sub. And to try to manage all that with an aux send, you know, everybody uses the traditional kick drum and bass when they give an aux send example, but I'm talking about I have other inputs that I like to just tickle the top part of a sub. And so it doesn't make sense for me to have an aux send. But really the answer is talk to any systems guy that knows anything about smart and ask them if it's cool to use aux on a sub, and they'll tell you, man, it's a bad idea.
Well, thank you. That's really good. That actually brings up another kind of point, and I know we'll have to wrap up here soon, but the relationship between you, the engineer, so this would be both for you, Pooch, and Tater, you, the engineer, and your tech. What's that like? How's an ideal relationship working together? And then any recommendations that you can give to other engineers working with system techs, both on both ends of the snake.
Tater?
Well, for many years I had the same tech, many years, and Paul White, I'll give him a little shout out.
Yeah. Paul White.
Yeah, and I don't know what to say. He was like my right-hand guy. He still is, So he knew how to read me, and knew how to when to interject to me. He knew when he needed to communicate with me and when not to communicate with me.
Hey, there's
especially
Paul White
during
the
show.
Look, Paul White. There he is.
He is?
In the picture.
There he is.
Yeah.
He's in the picture.
Yeah.
And to me, that was the biggest thing. He knew when to come into me and say something. He never hit me on the back. You're missing a cue. There was none of that. He knew what I was doing. And I don't like to be interrupted during the show. He knows that. He would field all the intercom calls or whatever, backline things, and word all that stuff off. He was invaluable to me. So Iron Maiden's a little different. I can't even fit a tech back where I stand. There's only room for one person. And so I generally on that, other than setting up the stuff on the stage, I handle all my own. And I always do. I set up my own world and all that kind of stuff. So it's basically the relationship and how they interacts with you during the day and knowing your needs and your things not to do during the show.
So that's how to be a good system tech.
It is.
And in my book, I don't. Yeah. I just need him to know how to read me and when to communicate and when not. Really. And Paul was a master at that.
That's
even on days off.
Yeah, even on days off. No, but I mean that's the real deal, is knowing when not to speak. I think is if I'm talking to a younger kid that's just starting in this business, it's knowing when it's the right time to ask a question. No question is wrong, but knowing when to ask it is a real skill. From my perspective, system engineers, it's important that I have a personal relationship with them and have that same kind of thing that's going on with Tater, but it's not as important to me as, my relationship with the system engineer is super dependent. Like I basically, as a mixer, I want to hand my left and right to a system guy and go, hear how it sounds right here, make the rest of the room sound like that. And so I depend on the system engineer like hugely. Unlike some other mixers, I am the guy that wants a partner in making it all sound excellent. And so, I've had some amazing guys in my career, man, I can't even name them all. There's literally like 10 of them. Brett Stack Cookie, God, Mike Hackman I have right now, Tim Shaner.
Pooch has 2 guys out there.
Yeah,
one
I do.
For left
actually.
and one for right.
No, it's interesting. Mike Hackman doesn't work for the sound company. He works for Iron Maiden. And so he is a system engineer hired by Iron Maiden. And it actually works out well. But there is also then an additional system engineer brought in by the sound company, by Clare Brothers. So I do end up with 2 system guys, and I'm blessed in that way. And those guys bounce stuff off of each other. Anyway, I'm very lucky to be in the position that I'm in.
So with the various bands, Pooch, do you typically do the tuning, or do you leave that up to the system engineers to do the tuning, and then you guys fine tune it together? Or how does that work in that relationship?
I stay out of it. I'll stay there. I'm there, like at front of house while a system engineer is aligning and tuning, and I'll participate in it. I'll look at Smart and say, hey, let's try this or let's do that. But for the most part, I rely heavily on a system engineer to align everything, and then him to listen to his stuff first, and then kind of turn the keys over to me. And I do fine tuning mostly.
I've got a question.
We know how many times he plays certain songs if that day is going good or bad. So you know when to get ready for line check just because of that. So yeah.
Hey, let me throw another question out to both of you, Pooch and Tater. Who's the production manager that influenced you the most in your career?
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
It might be a tough one because there might be several, but let's.
Wow.
Jeez.
Well, I'll start. Everyone's got, all the production managers have their own different, kind of way of doing things. I mean, we got to start with Jim Digby, because of what he's done for not only our careers, but for the industry. That's a given. Everybody already knows that. Yeah. We love Jim for all that. But I'll go way back. I mean, back when I worked at Showco for all those youthful years I worked with some great production managers, some fantastic ones before cell phones and internet, just maybe a fax machine if you were lucky. So many, probably too many to name. I mean, Pooch, you've been a production manager, so maybe you can, I've done tours where Pooch is the production manager. So,
so is that your answer?
Oh, wow. Yeah, not a chance. I would say, in kind of that same realm that you're talking about there, Tater and I were in a bunch of situations where we were like the opening act, like for Opie. Opie was mixing AC/DC and we did a Slash run. And so I was the production manager. Yeah, I was the production manager for Slash, and I got to watch a real pro like do his thing. And so I would say that he had a real influence on me. Jim, of course, because we spent, 13 years with Jim, and still he's a friend of ours today. We talk to him all the time. Man, I don't know. I think, I've worked with a lot of great ones, Chris Gratton. I did Limp Bizkit and Justin Bieber with him. Ian Kinnersley. Geez. I can't think of anyone else. Ian Day. Yeah. Patrick Ledwith.
Patrick's fantastic. God, there's just so many.
That's awesome.
So where this goes is you can kind of see you guys have been doing great on this webcast for us, and just talking to various engineers that aren't working or trying to be creative in this downtime. What are some of the things besides you, Pooch, on the internet all the time?
The king of all audio webinars.
I'm the king of all media right now.
Yeah, king of video, and he doesn't mix front of house anymore.
I don't.
What are some of the other things you've been able to do, and what are you working on? Are you thinking about getting back into getting set up for when the doors open up? And what is your flow for pre-production? What do you guys do? That's a loaded question.
That's a loaded twofold question. So in the off time, I'm trying to spend every minute expanding my learning. There's so much being offered by all kinds of manufacturers, and DiGiCo included. Man, if you aren't out there every single day, like going to a webinar and learning from people, then you're really missing out.
My favorite are the short Dan Page ones. I know he's here today, but I've told you this before. I've told you this before, Matt.
Thank you.
Those short one subject ones are that right to the point, quick. You can go back to them. That's actually my favorite ones. Is those quick, short, right to the point ones.
Thank you, Tater.
Super short. Whatever the talk is.
Yeah.
But I've also kind of thinking outside of the box a little bit. I'm taking a couple of courses in regards to networking, not audio networking, but, like Cisco, taking a course on a Cisco site, learning about standard IPv6 and learning about networking in general so that I can have a better handle on audio networking, and because that's where we're all headed.
That's very smart.
So, been doing that a lot.
Cool.
Can I ask Dan a question?
Oh, yeah.
Dan, shielded or unshielded Cat 6?
For what purpose? For waves or for
any audio networking in and out of a DiGiCo? I know they
shielded probably.
What's that?
I mean, I'm no networking expert, but I would go shielded. We're talking long distance runs, probably. All those sort of things, those physical, environmental things that can affect cabling. You can't go wrong with some shielded cabling.
Fantastic.
There are a lot of connections on the desk that are connected to ground through that shield connection. So definitely go there. I just say be aware of it too, because I have a dongle that I really like, and if you to get into my MacBook, and if you plug a shielded Cat 6 into it, the HDMI port will actually cycle on and off. So anyway, it all depends on what you're connected with. Yeah. All right, now I have a final question to wrap us up today. I know I've seen some more great questions come in, but we do need to wrap it up for today. But I think this is a great one to end on. Daniel Hernandez asks, any tips for the youngest engineers or for younger engineers? What advice do you guys have for those that are starting off in this industry?
Stay in school.
Online, of course.
Become a doctor or a lawyer. Doctor, lawyer, anything but this. What do you think, Tater?
Well, I think right now it's tough because I don't know what's going to happen when we start to come back and how it's all going to go, and I have a lot of weird feelings about all that, and especially for younger guys and older guys and every guy, or girl, or any person going back into it. It's just get as much information as you can. Go to a local sound company and just do whatever you can. Sweep the floor up to asking for stay late and working on SD7s and that are in the shop and stuff like that. Don't be scared to, I've noticed now, just don't be scared to reach out. We're all on social media. If you got a question or something, don't be scared to say, hey man, I'm a younger guy. What do I do here? What do I do there? Me personally, I have no problem answering those. I answer them, I don't want to say all day long, but I get maybe 5-6 a day, and I have no problem. As long as it's an audio question, I have no problem, answering it.
For me, I would say, I always tell younger kids in this business, listen, before you're going to get any opportunity to be in front of any sort of equipment and be a mixer, you have to be able to get along with people. So if I were starting in this business right now, I would be studying psychology. I'd be studying how do I get along with people? How do I get something from somebody without them knowing that I'm getting it from them, if that makes sense. I believe that the secret to my success is being able to walk into a room full of crazy people and be able to identify what their needs are. That's really what my secret to my success is. It's not about me being a good mixer. Before I even get an opportunity to mix, that's what I have to do, is walk into a room full of crazy people and identify what their needs are.
I've never seen anybody get fired for lack of knowledge. Let's put it that way. Right. It's about getting along with others, especially if you're looking for a touring job, which is really all I can speak to. It's all about getting along. And if people like you, they're going to want you around. No matter what your knowledge is, you're going to learn how to do the gig. If people want you around, they're going to keep you around, no matter what your knowledge is. So that's especially in the touring industry, you live so close with everybody. You're with so many people, such long hours of the day. Just be cool, be nice, get along. And if, usually that'll get you further than anything. And I do see right now a lot of people come out of schools and they think they're going to mix. That really doesn't happen in this industry. If you think you're going to graduate as an engineer or however they graduate and come in and think you're going to mix the band, that doesn't happen in this industry. You got to know it from 4/0 to flying it. You got to know chain motors, and you got to know how to do it. And you got to do it for a while before you get those shots.
Is there any advice you'd give to anybody on how to manage your touring life and your family life?
I'm learning that right now, how to find, after almost 33 years, I'm just learning that now.
Because this is the longest time you've been home in 30 years. Yeah, exactly.
There's so many firsts for me every day now that it's to me one of the best parts of this tragedy we're going through right now is learning this stuff I've never known before from being home this long. So it's hard for me to answer because I'm learning new stuff every day about that.
Yeah, it's tough, man. I mean, early on in my career, both my wife and I realized that I was going to be gone, 10 to 11 months a year. And so we made decisions in our personal life that reflect that. So, you kind of have to have a partner that knows what they're getting into.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a very strong wife that kind of has her own life when I'm not here. And so now that I've been here for 3 months, she's like, when are you leaving?
So you're getting in her way.
I am getting in the way of her life for sure. But I know it takes a special person to kind of manage all that, and a special partner to manage that as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you spending time with us today, sharing your knowledge, all that stuff. We've mentioned the phrase wrong end of the snake a few times. Pooch, would you tell us a little bit about this endeavor? And actually, either one of you can, but would you tell us a little bit about it and where people can learn more from you?
Totally. So Tater and I decided that we wanted to start a webcast, and it's Tuesdays at 2 p.m. normally, although this week it's at 3 p.m. Because this week we have Mike Shinoda on from Linkin Park. So 3 p.m. on Tuesday is Mike Shinoda. And basically the thought process behind the webcast is, Tater and I have had this long-term relationship. We wanted to do a webcast about relationships. So, for instance, this Tuesday, we've been with Mike for 13 years, Tater longer than me, and we wanted to talk about what that relationship is between the three of us, a band member and the two of us. So that's wrong end of the snake.
And where can they find that?
YouTube. So just search Wrong End of the Snake on the YouTube. It's a YouTube channel, and we stream straight to there every week on Tuesday.
And what time zone is that, Pooch?
2 p.m. Eastern Standard, but this week is 3 p.m. Eastern Standard.
Fantastic.
We have some great other special guests coming up also.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, we do. On June 16th, we have James Gordon is going to be on Wrong End of the Snake. So your guys' CEO and good friend to us is going to come on, and we're going to talk about our relationship and I don't know. I mean, I think I've known him for at least 20 years, maybe more. So, we're looking forward to that.
Fantastic. Dan,
we thank him for coming too.
Oh, yeah, That'll be entertaining for sure. I will definitely be tuning in for that one as well. Dan, would you give us the rundown on what we can expect this week and what DiGiCo has lined up?
Hey, Dan, before you get started, let me just promote one more thing. It's Pooch and Raybold, which is my other YouTube thing that I got going on. Chris Raybold, an amazing front of house engineer. He and I are also doing a little YouTube event, and that is on my YouTube channel. Search Pooch Sound Engineer, and you can find us there. Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Oh, very good. Absolutely. So we've got lots coming up, actually. Tomorrow night in our Locked Up with DiGiCo, we have front of house engineer Ricky Ashford. Tuesday, headliner radio, front of house engineer Colin Pink, who has worked with Hans Zimmer, MTV's, EMA's, the Brits. So lots to look forward to there. Wednesday, for our S-Series customers, we have a look at version 2.6, which actually comes out next week. So new software for the S-Series customers next week with Fernando and Tom. And Thursday, a full week next week, Thursday, Demetrius Moore and friends with a Quantum 338. So lots and lots to look forward to in the coming days,
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you, Tater Pooch. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Kyle. Really appreciate all you guys spending the time, sharing your knowledge. And I just had a lot of fun today. And thank you all for it. Everybody have a great week, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks
everybody.
for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Dan. Matt.